So, everybody knows about the new Percy Jackson series coming out, and we all remember how the movies ended up. So, today we're going to be discussing where the movies failed and what we hope to see in the brand new Percy Jackson series coming soon to Disney Plus.
Hi, welcome to Project Nerd. My name is Katie, and this is,
Rachel,
and we're here to talk about the new Percy Jackson series.
before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to Project Nerd if you aren't, and be sure to follow us on all of our social medias at Project Nerd CSS. So, Katie, I am so excited about this series. I have loved Percy Jackson since I was in, I think, middle school. I mean, when was the first time you remember really reading one of the Percy Jackson books?
I think I was 15.
So, right about the same age.
Yeah, and I didn't have the physical copies, so I had a pirated like ebook version, and I finished all four of them in like I think 2 weeks.
Yeah, that age was really a time where I was just like consuming books, and it was just so cool to kind of be a part of. It almost felt like, um I mean, we're too young to remember like when the Harry Potter books were being published, right? And having to wait for a new book to come out and read it. This was like the first series that I feel like we really got into where it's like, oh my gosh, we actually have to wait like months, potentially even a year for a new book to come out. And I just remember it being like so nerve-wracking.
I actually was around when I had to wait for the Harry Potter books, so it's like a
Oh
double
no.
double. Oh, it's okay. It's all right. I accept my age. Um, so do you think that Disney Plus is a good choice for rebooting the series, or do you think they're gonna Disneyfy it in such broad terms?
Um, I hope they don't, honestly. I
Mm.
mean, I hate to keep comparing this series to Harry Potter, but it's like the only thing I can think of, or like the only real reference. As I mean, Disney obviously has, the money and the means to really make a good show, and do this series so much more justice than the movies did. And we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We will discuss the films.
Yes.
But they've done a lot of good with a lot of their other properties. I'm a big Marvel fan. I'm a big Star Wars fan. Might be an unpopular opinion, but I like all of the stuff that they are doing with that. So, I have high hopes. I'm optimistic, I would say. What about you? Same?
Yeah, especially with the original author, Rick Riordan, who actually wrote the books, is the director. So hopefully the timeline events should actually match up a little bit more to the book. And I understand that with like a book series, you may not get all the details, but like at least most of them will be still intact. Like the order of events will still be there, even like some things are left out. It's not going to be the world's biggest problem. It's just not as bad as the movie did it.
Right. I mean, having Rick involved is already such a step above because I know the movies didn't. And I think that's super important when you're adapting a book series to have literally, the author of the books giving input and picking and choosing sort of which events need to be kept in and which details are maybe not as important because you are restricted time
Mm.
wise, less so with a show. I think this is going to be it's going to be long. It's going to be 7 or 8 episodes, I think. And so and I think those episodes are going to be close to an hour. So they should have a lot of time to sort of get through things. But yeah, I'm glad that they decided to get him involved this time, because I remember when the movies came out, he just seemed so frustrated with how they turned out and was very sort of public about that opinion.
Yeah, I could understand why. And I also appreciate that the cast is the actual age of the characters. Because in the book series, like they start at 12, they end at 16. And the fact that they looked older wasn't really a problem, but it just felt kind of, like rushed with all of it in the end.
Right. I mean, it's supposed to be this kind of,
Mm.
again, Harry Potter, that's the biggest comparison. It's supposed to be this kind of like coming of age story where you're supposed to start young and you watch these characters grow. So having them basically already be the age they would have been at the end of the book, it didn't really resonate as much, at least for me. And honestly, I like those kind of movies where, kids can really kind of shine. And Percy Jackson is so cool in that you've got all these young kids that, have all these skills and um, all the stuff they can do. And I think it's good for young kids to see that, like, children that age can be, you know, strong and fearless and go on these crazy cross country adventures, which is essentially what the first book is, and do all this stuff by themselves. So I think I'm definitely glad that they are casting within the correct age range. And I'm excited about the cast. I really am. I know that there's been some opinions, we'll say, on the internet about certain choices, but um, I'm optimistic. I think I have faith that they're all going to do a really great job.
I can honestly get over if the characters don't look exactly the same, as long as there are like the few characteristics. Like as long as you have Percy's blue eyes and you have Annabeth's like gray eyes, as long as you have those features in them and you keep the same personality traits, I honestly don't see the problem. I don't get it. So
Yeah, I mean, personality is the biggest thing. And I mean, as someone who's been a fan of the books for so long, I'm total honesty here. It, there was like 30 seconds where I was like, oh, okay, she's not going to look, you know, the way I imagined her. But then you really just have to think like, okay, it's not the same. It's a different story, it's a different medium, you know, and there's so much more you can do with that character. So I really hope that my hope though is that since they've decided to cast this black actress for Annabeth, I really hope they sort of lean into like that aspect of it. That was weird wording, but like Annabeth in the books faced a lot of struggles. She faced a lot of like adversity, and she felt like she was underestimated and people, didn't believe in her and everything. And I think that those kind of messages can really be amplified in a different way that can resonate with people. So I just hope I hope it doesn't end up like exactly the same, except now the character is black instead of white. I really hope they sort of lean into like showing um, issues within that community and working that into the story.
I think the same thing. Like as long as like more like cohesive or it matches the perception and it goes with like the series and the books and what's actually written, then it's fine in the end.
Yeah. Honestly, for me, the biggest thing is the story. And I feel like with that, we should discuss the films because that, in my
Yes.
opinion, is my biggest issue with the films is the story.
Without any disrespect to the actors or the original directors, I I'm a no authority. I just know the books and I'm just a fan. I have to understand that. But there's a certain amount of freedom you can get. Like some of those things they did in like in the movies, like they dropped the bomb that he was the son of Poseidon. all of a sudden. I'm like, no, that wasn't cool. And I get them like, the details of the property. They didn't tell Percy he was a Jackson thief until like he was at least in the camp and they forced him on the quest. Like they didn't explain that to him, but I get why they rushed those certain things. But it just seems like everything got to the point where it's like, well, now that we rushed it to this point, we can just do whatever we want now. It just everything just got changed so fast. And they actually went to places they never went to in the book. And so it's like, cool, cool.
Right. I mean, you watched the movies more recently than I have. I feel like I have a pretty good memory of at least the first one. I basically, I haven't seen the second one. I sort of refuse to just because I heard about how it turned out and I was like, I don't need to put myself through that. But I do remember the first one quite well. And I mean, my thing is adapting a book into a movie really should be the easiest thing to do because the story's written. Like you already have a story. All you have to do is sort of condense a novel's worth of story down into 2 hours. That to me does not seem that hard. But they, in the first film at least, they completely altered the story, the core of the story, to make it like this sort of quest to find the, I mean, they're basically traveling across the country to find the find these pearls that are supposed to help them escape the underworld once they get there, which those aren't even given to them until like right before they enter the underworld. So I mean,
Basically.
yeah, it's just like, why did you have to sort of rework everything in order to make the story make sense? The story already makes sense. And then the fact that they're adding, again, if you're adapting a book into a movie, you shouldn't be adding things that weren't in the book, in my opinion. Because really, because you're on such a restricted time limit, you should be taking things away. And if you feel like
Yes.
you need to add something to take up more time, you just add something back in that's in the book. And the first Percy Jackson book has so many great action sequences.
I
I mean,
know.
there's the fight. I mean, aside from the fight at the beginning with Percy and the Minotaur, after they go on, after they are sent on the quest, they fight Medusa. They fight. I don't know if I remember which monsters, but in the St. Louis Arch,
The
uh,
mother of all monsters. I know that one.
yeah, um, there's the scene um in the abandoned water park.
Yep.
There's the Lotus Hotel. Percy fights Ares like 3 times because he just keeps showing up and is like, fight me to this 12-year-old, which is honestly hilarious. And I can't even remember if he was in the movie.
He wasn't.
So he wasn't. Exactly. And that to me was the funniest part because this god keeps showing up and he's like, you should fight me. And Percy's like, why? I don't understand. Why are you doing this? I mean, there's so much cool stuff that happens. And it's like, okay, you're 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 not focusing on the right things. And that's like, that to me is the biggest core problem. I can put aside, the characters don't look right, they're not the right age, all that stuff is like cosmetic to me. But the story, I mean, Percy Jackson's like the perfect story. It's literally the perfect little adventure romp thing with gods. And I love Greek mythology. So I don't know, man. I feel like they had it.
The thing that of like truly, truly annoyed me was I have to breathe when I think about it. They they added characters that didn't need to be there, like Persephone or
Persephone?
yes,
Yeah.
Hades' wife didn't need to be there. Um, the scene at the end where Luke is fighting them in New York, they don't even fight in New York. Luke doesn't even reveal he's a lightning thief until after they get the bolt back, till after he fights Ares, till after he flies through Zeus's domain. And in the movies, they have him flying on the shoes, but Percy actually gives the shoes to Grover because he says Sharon's like, maybe Zeus is mad at you, maybe you shouldn't fly. And like that was the whole like trap premise, and they don't even fight on the Empire State Building. And all that was just so messed up. And they like tossed all that away for like a scene where he fights Luke on a rooftop just to show his power with like water. I'm like, that wasn't necessary. You could have put that whole thing and show his sea god power when he was fighting Ares on the beach right before he flew
Right.
back.
Right. You chose not to include Ares, but there's a great scene right before they enter the underworld where he fights Ares on the beach. And it's like that would be the perfect case to show off the his like, abilities at manipulating water. And the thing with Luke just sort of frustrated me because in the books, he's like the perfect he's like he's supposed to be like the twist villain. Like you're not really supposed to see that he's the villain,
Yeah, you don't know.
you know? And if they had chosen to keep that a secret or hinted at it less, I think it really could have added a kind of shock value, but instead they just sort of have him show up at the end and he's like, "Yeah, I did it." And it's like, "Okay, great. Good job." I don't I don't know.
Like
I
I
mean,
go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm done.
I'm
I gotta
I could get over the nitpickiness of wanting to see like these scenes how they played out. But another thing, like even though they used the anti-M's Medusa's lair in it, like I like the adaptation with the iPod they did in the movie. I thought that was a neat trick instead of the mirror. But that was like the only thing I liked about that scene. And the thing about it is they made one of that meeting Medusa a plot scene or a plot character scene or a major scene. And the thing is, that was them walking into an accidental trap because they were hungry. That was never, yeah, that was a monster fighting like part of it, but that wasn't actually part of the actual like chain of events or anything. Yeah, they get the drachmas
right.
there, but yeah,
Right. I mean, that's the thing. It's like because they've adapted the story to the point where they're looking for these magic items. They're looking for the pearls, and that's what's directing them to these different places. But really, the story is that they're these young kids, preteens, on this cross country journey and they're running into problems. They don't have any food. They don't have any money. It's like, they don't really know what to do. And so they're kind of accidentally stumbling into these situations. And I guess apparently that's not exciting or intriguing. I mean, you can't really do that, I guess, when you've cast 18-year-olds. So I guess it makes sense that they had to do something else because now these characters are competent because they're adults. So,
and like the other thing that really bothered me is another 2 points that bothered me is one, they never went to Tennessee in the first place. They never went to the Parthenon. That was never a thing. They didn't even fight the Hydra until the second book in the Sea of Monsters, where it was like the monster donuts. And secondly, Percy gets there, he's all confused, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's failing, he's getting hit by everything, and all of a sudden he has a little bit of water in his hand. He goes, "Oh my god, I know everything now." And now he's like this master class fighter all of a sudden because he had touched water. Seriously? Really?
right. They didn't right. They didn't do anything with like the whole actually learning how to use your powers thing. It's that trope that people always get annoyed with when Star Wars does it, where it's like all of a sudden characters just know how to do things. And again, I think that plays into like the whole it that sort of thing doesn't really have as much of an impact when you've cast adults. If you were casting children, like real children, it would it would be a lot more impactful to have there be a little bit of a learning curve with the powers. But with
I
an
mean,
adult, I guess, I don't know.
in Annabeth's case, I could understand why she was like automatically on point with everything because she's been training for years and years and years. But like Percy's character, even though he did look about 17 or 16 at the time, he's bewildered, he's confused, he doesn't know what's going on. You couldn't give him like 1 or 2 days to, just, get that going, you know, get the details going down and like go into the details of the camp, actually build a story up while you're doing it. That wasn't something that could have been done. And so that's just so many little shortcuts. It's just it kind of
Right.
became like why?
Yeah, and that sort of I think falls into the time constraint type thing because they couldn't really spend as much time in in the camp at the beginning as they do in the books because they have to sort of push them out the door and get them started on the adventure. Um, and the thing with the Hydra, yeah, that's the thing about adding stuff. Like, why would you create an entirely new encounter when there's so many great encounters in the book already? You should have just picked one of those. Um, but honestly, I do like what you said about the Medusa scene. I do like that. Um, honestly, I do like the scene where they're in the Lotus Hotel. I think it's kind of goofy and silly and a little bit ridiculous, but I like it anyway. Um, and I think that honestly, I think that scene plays a little bit better because they are adults. I mean, in the book, it's like these 13-year-olds in a casino, and it's like, okay, this is a little bit awkward because like you're not
Yeah.
supposed to be here. But um in the movie, it's like I actually can't remember. You saw it more recently than I did. Did they drink at all while they were there?
No, they didn't
No?
drink,
Okay.
but that was one of the few scenes that actually kind of was close enough to the books and actually made sense. Like you know, I could see how they edited out the details. So instead of them taking the Lotus card, casino card, and using it to pay the taxi driver to go to LA, they stole the car when they were escaping out of the
Right,
hotel.
they stole the
That
sports car. That was pretty
I
fun.
see that was a good change. It was an adaptation, but it was close enough that it made some excitement. Like that was cool.
Yeah, honestly, that was fun. I liked that a lot because they were like thinking they were trying to escape and they were thinking about it. And I think it's so funny because when you walk through like a mall or a casino or something, you see the big fancy cars that are just sitting there, and it's like, what if I just got into it and drove it?
They'd be like, what if I just went like bloop, gone?
Right. And so that I thought was really fun. So there are some sort of redeeming qualities about this first movie. Um, I don't know about the second one. You're gonna have to tell me about that one.
Um,
But
this the second one, they first of all, my main problem with the second one, I'm not going to too far into this, but my main problem with the second one is Kronos doesn't come back to life until book number 4, and they rushed it.
yeah,
They rushed it
yeah, I heard that
because
about the second one too.
yeah,
Because I think after the first one came out, they knew that they weren't going to get all five. And so they were like, okay, we maybe get to make one more of these because critical reception of the first one was not great. And so we're just literally going to try and shoehorn all 5 books into this one movie.
um,
And they honestly should have just made the second movie or made the second book and just sort of left it in unfinished.
honestly, if they would have just made the second one, but followed the actual book, didn't add anything, and did a few adaptations to coincide what they did, they would be still be good. They still be making shit though. He will say, "Oh,
Right.
sorry."
Like then they could have brought it
Yeah,
back potentially. If nobody liked the first one, but everyone loved the second one, then guess what? You
then
can probably make a third.
there you
So I don't know
go.
why they didn't just go for it.
So, what I would like to see is I know they're going to have to cut some of the character building details out because of the time constraints, but I would like to see how them to follow I just want to like if they're gonna take if it's gonna be a 7 or 8 episodes, and they're gonna break that down into first season 7 episodes. They get to the quest. I just want to see them give enough time to explain things thoroughly, to build the characters, to build the plot. And I want to see that campiness, that, like almost childish nature to how the books explain things. How the fact that, yeah, it doesn't sound like an adult's talking because it's not an adult. Like that's the kind of dialogue I want to hear, basically.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the one thing I feel like these Disney shows are really doing well is character development. You know, I mean, they started with the Marvel shows and they were able to really expand upon these side characters that weren't really main characters in the movies, but now they have all of this development. And same thing with Star Wars. The Star Wars shows have been kind of introducing new characters for us to follow, but they're doing really well with character development. So I think with a show, I'm just really hoping that they take the time to kind of flesh out all of these characters and really make them feel like people. And I agree. I really hope they lean into the child aspect of it, because this is a story that's being told by children. The characters are all children. Um, and I think it's really got to have kind of, again, I'm going to bring back that Harry Potter comparison. I want to feel like I'm watching the first Harry Potter film. Harry Potter, I mean, I want to feel like I'm watching the Sorcerer's Stone, where it's
Yeah.
like whimsical and kind of lighthearted and just fun, because that's what the first book really is. That's how all these series start. They're kind of like, there's this looming sort of threat on the horizon, but we'll get to that. For now, I just kind of want to see them being kids, and going on this adventure. So, and I really want to see some of those great moments from the book that we talked about earlier.
Um, I want to see the one thing I want to see in particular, and I don't know if they'll include it or not because it's kind of like a side thing. When they get into the underworld, he focuses a lot on the underworld part of the book, but I understand why. If the Field of Elysium and the Field of Elysium and like the stadium, like the limbo areas, kind of skipped a little bit. That's kind of if they just like run through it real fast and they go into like Hades Palace area, you know what? They leave out the Elysium part because time constraints. That's fine. But I want to see the part where Annabeth is playing with Cerberus because I thought that was
Yes.
adorable.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that part. Yes, that would be so great. There's like all these little hidden gems in the book that you don't really remember if you haven't read it in a while, which I haven't. But um yeah, the book has so many great moments like that, and I really hope they kind of include stuff with that. On the topic of the underworld, I hope, as much as I'm saying I hope that this show is kind of has that sort of lighthearted feel, I hope that that doesn't mean that they're going to pull back on the parts that are dark. You
Oh
know,
no,
I
no.
think the underworld should look suitably intimidating and scary. Um, and because I think that's kind of a preview of, and if they're willing to do that, then I think that could be a preview of what's to come, because the books definitely get darker as the story goes along and a little bit more adult. So I definitely want to know that if they're able to sort of adapt all 5 books, that they're going to be true to the darker nature of, specifically, I think the 4th and 5th are pretty much the most, not really gruesome, but like grim, because that's where everything really goes down.
Yep. Another thing I want to see is I want to see the plot twist when Percy when they get to the underworld and Grover starts being pulled into the TARDIS, the pit of TARDIS. Like I want that shock value to still be there because I read it, I was like, oh, whoops. I'm not gonna curse, but that was my first mind. I'm like, Like, just to leave that kind of shock value into it, like, don't take that part out of it. And like when he was explaining that, like, I know what monsters feel like, but like this feels evil, this feels dark, this feels cold. Like, keep those subtle nuances of like the characters in them, so you kind of get the point. You be like, oh, well, that's not good feeling.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, definitely. The last thing I think I'm really curious about is I would love to, and I hope they include this because it's the reason these books exist. I'm really curious to see how they handle Percy's dyslexia
Oh, that's a good
because
point.
we've never really had this main character in a story that suffers from something like that. And again, for people who don't know, that's literally the reason that these books exist. Rick Riordan wrote these books for his son, who is dyslexic, and um, he wanted him to have the story of a hero who had the same problems that he did. And so that is absolutely something that I think needs to be included and at least acknowledged, because I think that would be important for so many kids to see, because so many people struggle with that. And I think as a learning, I think, I don't want to say like disorder, but as something that can cause kids to struggle in school, I think it's important to see that, like, it's not, you can still be a hero in a story.
Like, it doesn't matter, like what you were born with or the issues you have. Like, that shouldn't be the defining factor in saying, oh, you have this, so you can't do that. Like, this series is about, and every single one of the demigods all have the same problems. They're all dyslexic. They're all ADHD. They're all impulsive. They're all these things. And it's just like showing that, yes, the young kids, yes, they have these problems, but it doesn't make stop them. They're still doing all these things. They're fighting monsters. They're traveling across the country. They're doing
Mhm.
these amazing quests, and
Yeah.
not and it's not getting in their way. It's not stopping them.
Yeah. They're still heroes. They're still
Yeah.
being heroes. And I think this, if they do it right, this show can go a really long way in showing kids that, you know, you can still be, you can still be a hero despite the things that you may struggle with or the things that may potentially hold you back.
I just fear that some of the people who didn't read the books might not get some, like, the references and why how things are explained. Like, things are explained rather childish like, but I just hope that the people who watch it will understand that there's a reason for it. Like, they don't talk eloquently, they don't talk completely. Their words are jumbled. The way they explain things is cut off short. But I hope people don't take that as like, oh, what is it wrong? They can't write a script or something. Like, I hope people don't think of it like that, because that's not the case.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. There is definitely a faction of fans who got into it because they saw the movies, and maybe saw the movies before they read the books, or maybe saw the movies and haven't read the books. Um, and so they're going to be looking at it through a different lens. Um, and yeah, I hope they like it. I hope that, they won't be unhappy with some of the things that are included from the books that are going to make us happy. So, there might be some discourse, but I'm prepared to handle it. I'm prepared to defend with
Yeah, I
all
just
my heart because I love these books so much.
I do too. I started reading it again on the like, I was lying in bed reading it, and next thing I know, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read for like 20 minutes. I'm like, oh, look, it's 4 in the morning. Oh, whoops.
Mhm.
So like,
Mhm.
that's the kind of like infectious power that that kind of story has, and that's what I want to see translated. I want to be like, okay, what's next? Like, you immediately, like, you're on the hook. You're like, all right, yeah, what's next?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess for now, all we can do is cross our fingers and pray.
Yes. Yes, all the good things. Thank you so much for watching this video and hear us rant slash talk about our distaste for the first movie. But if you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe to Project Nerd for CCS.
Leave a comment down below and let us know which scene from the first Percy Jackson book you are most excited to see adapted into live action. And thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.